Have you ever said this about yourself? I'm not creative. Maybe you've said it casually. Maybe you've said it apologetically. Maybe someone once asked you what you enjoy doing and you responded quickly, "Oh, I'm not creative like that." Or maybe you said something like this to a friend, "Well, of course you're creative, you're talented. I can't draw, I can't paint, I can't make art." And every time I hear those words, I feel something rise up inside me. A kind of righteous frustration. Not because I want to correct someone, but because I recognize something deeper. When someone says, "I'm not creative," they're not simply making a neutral observation. They're repeating a lie they've come to believe. And that lie has silenced millions of imaginations. This lie is one of the reasons Creative Courage Sanctuary exists. Because tending to creativity often begins with tending to creative wounds. So today, we're going to gently dismantle one of the most common and most damaging lies we carry. I'm not creative. Welcome to the Courage to Create podcast, a creative sanctuary for Christian artists and the wounded imagination. I'm Theodora Songhai, and I'm grateful you're here. But where does this lie begin? I think this lie grows out of two misunderstandings. This is just my theory. The first is our narrow definition of creativity. The second is the elevation of creativity into celebrity culture. Let's start with the first. Somewhere along the way, we began to believe that creativity only counts when it is public, visible, and recognized. Painter in a gallery, an actor on stage, a musician performing in front of an audience. In other words, creativity became something that belongs to a very small group of people who produce visible, artistic output. But if that's the definition of creativity, then yes, most people would conclude they're not creative because they're measuring creativity by performance rather than participation. But when we look more closely at life, creativity is everywhere. Creativity appears in the everyday. For example, it shows up in the meal someone prepares with care, in the way a parent tells a bedtime story, in the way a teacher explains a difficult concept in a new way, in the way someone arranges a room so that it feels welcoming and alive. Creativity is also present when we solve problems, when we improvise, when we design systems, when we find new ways to care for people. Even something like telling a lie, interestingly, requires imagination. You have to invent something that doesn't exist, which reminds us that creativity itself is morally neutral. It can be used for truth or deception, beauty or manipulation. But the ability itself, the capacity to imagine and produce something new, is something we all carry. Creativity is not rare. It is simply often unnoticed. The second misunderstanding is what I call the elevation problem. In our modern culture, creativity has become closely tied to status. Artists become celebrities. Success is measured through visibility, awards, followers, exhibitions, publication deals, and all of those kinds of things. And slowly, quietly, creativity then becomes something associated with acclaim. But historically, creativity did not always look like this. For centuries, many creative people were not called artists at all. They were called artisans. An artisan is a skilled craft worker who creates objects by hand. Furniture, clothing, pottery, tools. Everyday objects designed to serve a purpose. Their work was not created for museums. It was created for life. Another word that suffered the same fate is the word amateur or amateur. I love looking up dictionary definitions. And the Merriam-Webster dictionary defines an amateur as someone who engages in a pursuit as a pastime rather than a profession. Someone who practices something without necessarily seeking financial gain. But the etymology of the word is far more beautiful. The word amateur comes from the Latin amator, which simply means a lover. So an amateur or an amateur is someone who does something for the love of it. Not because it brings status, not because it brings recognition, not because it generates an income, but because something in them responds with affection. Imagine what creativity would look like if we reclaimed that meaning. Imagine giving yourself permission to create not as a professional, but as a lover of beauty. It reminds me of a passage from a beautiful book called The Unknown Craftsman by Sotsu Yanagi. Apologies to my Japanese cousins, I completely butchered his name. I've left details in the show notes. In the book, Yanagi reflects on pottery created during the Korean Yi dynasty. These pieces were not originally considered works of art. They were simply everyday objects. Bowls, bottles, containers. Objects made by anonymous craftspeople for daily use. Yanagi describes them like this. They assume no pretentiousness. They are simply there in all their naturalness. The people who made them did not imagine their work displayed in museums or sold at extraordinary, eye-watering prices. They were not creating for recognition. They were simply making something well. And yet, ironically, today, those same objects are now recognized as incredibly beautiful. Their beauty lies partly in their humility, in their lack of self-consciousness, in the quiet devotion with which they were made. Creativity like this reminds us of something important. Beauty does not require an audience. When we remember what we explored in a previous episode, that we are made in the image of a creator, something shifts. Creativity then is now not limited to a specific output. It includes designing systems, composing music, writing stories, cooking meals, crafting spaces, gardening, inventing solutions, caring for people creatively, teaching in imaginative ways. Creativity is the ability to participate in the unfolding of the world. It is one of the ways we reflect the nature of God. So when someone says, "I'm not creative," what they are often really saying is, my creativity doesn't look like the forms our culture celebrates. And that is a very different statement. When we believe the lie that we are not creative, several things happen. First, we silence curiosity. We stop experimenting. We stop playing. Second, we disconnect from a part of our God-given identity. We become consumers of creativity instead of participants. And third, we begin to believe that beauty belongs to other people, that imagination belongs to other people, that creative expression belongs to a small elite group. But that is not the story Scripture tells. Creativity is part of being human. When we release the lie that we are not creative, something gentle begins to return. Permission, curiosity, playfulness. We begin to experiment again. We begin to notice beauty again. We begin to make small things again. Not necessarily for recognition, but for love. And this is where courage quietly begins. So if you have believed the lie that you are not creative, let me gently offer you a different possibility. What if creativity is already present in your life? What if it simply looks quieter than the forms our culture celebrates? What if your creativity appears in the way you care for others, solve problems, make things, imagine possibilities, or shape spaces of belonging? You don't need permission from the art world to create. You already carry the image of a creator. Your creativity does not need to be spectacular. It only needs to be sincere. This week, I want to invite you to do something very small. Notice one creative act in your daily life. It might be something you cook, a space you arrange, a way you solve a problem, a small piece of writing or drawing. Instead of dismissing it, pause and acknowledge it. You are participating in creativity. And if you'd like to explore this journey more deeply, you can join the Creative Courage Sanctuary community at the Creative Courage Sanctuary website. Details in the show notes. I share reflections, guided exercises, and resources for reclaiming your creative courage. And if this episode encouraged you, I'd love for you to subscribe to the podcast and share it with someone who might need this reminder. Until next time, create bravely, rest deeply, and remember, your creativity is holy. If today's episode encouraged you, please subscribe and leave a review. It helps the sanctuary reach other artists who need it. And if you'd like guided creative exercises, devotionals, and spiritual tools for your artistic journey, visit the Creative Courage Sanctuary website and join the email community. Until next time, create bravely, rest deeply, and remember, your creativity is holy.